We have operated this company in Colombo for the last 15 years. We started in 2007, staff of 4 people, supporting one core product, and we've now grown to 85 people, supporting 15 plus products using various different modern technologies. We develop software for export only. This has given us an opportunity to bring in a steady flow of dollars into the country every month. We believe in giving university students an opportunity to work on real-world projects. As a result, we have built a very robust internship program. We have successfully implemented several CSR projects over the years, particularly focused on gender diversity. We have a very relaxed global one-office culture. We have standard HR policies across the board. We believe that respect must be shown to all fellow employees, regardless of geographic location. We believe that face-to-face interactions are very important in building business relationships. As a result, we regularly promote two-way travel programs and make it available for all of our staff on a regular basis.
Hello everyone, welcome to RNIT, the groundbreaking IT revolution in Sri Lanka. So now we are going to take you on a tour of RNIT.
Here you will get to know how fantastic team of tech-savvy IT experts transform fresh ideas into high-tech products in a fast-paced business environment. Established in the year 2010, our narrative over a decade is a journey of determination and courage. As a fully owned Sri Lankan business grown sprung from the home soil, our team is over 4,500 experts serving a reputed international clientele. In our mission of empowering humanity, Oral Labs, Oral BPM, Oral Studio, Oral Academy, and Oral Cloud are some of the business verticals we manage to deliver quality products to our clientele. We also provide a range of recreational activities such as gaming, play music to support our employees in striking a healthy balance between on and off work times. Oral IT fosters an open culture, keeping the potential of innovation in mind. We inspire individuals to develop new ideas and make connections that will lead to growth.
So visit us and experience what makes us exceptional in the global IT industry.
The real goal of learning isn't knowledge, it's change. When we learn, we create new pathways, new circumstances, new futures for ourselves and for others. Pearson is the world's leading learning company, but what we really make, the thing we are most proud of, is change. For over 50 years, we have been transforming lives through education, helping tens of millions of people all over the world reach their full potential. And yet we are lifelong learners ourselves, forever evolving to meet the moment, with our history to ground us and our creativity to inspire us. We're reinventing everything we do, from paper to pixels, from physical to virtual. We're making learning more personal, more equitable, more powerful. There's never been a better time to learn, and we are. We are the change we believe in. We are learning.
The world has changed due to unforeseen events in ways we have not come to terms with. The paradigm has shifted, where business as usual was good enough, but good enough is no more. How we live, how we travel, and importantly, how we do business will never be the same again. Are you driven by change? Change has become exponential. Disruption is the new normal. business must differentiate if anyone needs to be relevant, and the growing demand for an innovative, quality, and a memorable service is high. The service is often the brand and the need. We understand this, which propels to the transformation to digital and the profound impact. Everyone wants a better service to operate better. We bring together the right people, irrespective of industries, with depth of talent who will generate value. Together as a one team, we enable you to navigate the ever-changing landscape, achieving more with the use of FSM and ERP services. We are professional, committed, and the experience we have is unmatched on taking the customers and helping them to reach the full potential. The battle stars are ready. Jumpstart your FSM and ERP transformation. Accents.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar of the SLASCOM Tech Together webinar series organized by the Regional Development Forum for the third consecutive year. My name is Sachin, and I'm your host for today's live session from Aurel IT. And for today's session, we have two industry specialists to guide you on the mastering the front-end development with React. Without taking much time, let's get into the exciting session. However, do stay tuned as we are giving you a valuable opportunity to participate in a quiz to win an amazing prize. We would also like to say special thanks to our platinum sponsors. We have LSEG and Vital Hub Innovations, gold sponsors Pearson, Aurel IT, and Accents, and our knowledge partner for this session is Tech Labs Global. Without further ado, let me introduce our speakers for this session. First off, we have Avishka Tushan Padmasiri, who is an Associate Tech Lead at Tech Labs Global. And we have Loganathan Bhavanitharan, who is also an Associate Software Engineer at Tech Labs Global. Thank you for joining us today. So to start things off, Avishka, over to you.
Thanks, Sachin. Hi all. So let me share my screen. So hope you guys are having a great day. Before starting, let me give me a second. Yeah. So before starting, I want to clarify the things that we're going to cover in our session, right? First thing that we'll be covering what React is, and then we'll be guiding you guys through the key facts that you guys need to understand on React, and then with my colleague Bhavan, he'll be doing a session on how we can implement a web application to React. So we'll be implementing a quiz app. So let's start the session right now. And so first thing, what is React? So this is an obvious question, right? But so React is a front-end JavaScript library which you can build user interfaces, and it is based on JavaScript. And the reason why I'm not saying it's not a framework is that it's a library. Is that with the framework, you get certain features from the Scratch itself, right? So for example, when you use Angular, you will get the whole paging and the routing built in itself, right? But with React, you wouldn't get that things from the Scratch. So that's why we mention it as a library, not a framework. But still, you can get the framework features from React itself by utilizing third-party libraries. So, this ability to utilize flexible components and libraries let you be more flexible with the whole React environment. Moving on. So I mentioned that React is based on JavaScript, right? So we use JavaScript across worldwide, and why can't we just use pure JavaScript on our applications, right? The reason is that with React, you get a certain set of boilerplate calls, and so that makes the whole number of lines that you need to, the number of calls that you need to write will be lower. And the React, by its nature, supports reusability, allowing to write reusable codes. And the whole nature of having this component-based architecture is what makes React more exciting. And this whole component architecture also makes that large, when we are building large scale applications, if you write with your JavaScript, it will be like a very large code base that you need to manage. But with React, you can do the scalability, and the management of the code base would be much more convenient if you use a library like React. So, and since we can use JavaScript within React itself, so you can still even write vanilla JavaScript inside your applications. So next few slides we'll actually cover. So we'll actually cover the key things and aspects that you guys need to understand before getting into React. So first thing is the document object model. So some of you guys might be already familiar with it. It's already available in any HTML document or any JavaScript application. If you have done it, it'll be there. So what it represents is that the structural representation of all the nodes in HTML documents. If you see this image, like, so you see the document, and then we have the root element, and then you have the head, body, all these structures and the nodes are there, right? So the DOM actually gives you a virtual representation of it. And using JavaScript, we could modify and manipulate this DOM. So in summary, like if you want to modify your HTML document using JavaScript, you will be actually using DOM, and we'll be manipulating using JavaScript. So what React differentiate when using the DOM is that it uses something called a virtual DOM. So it is a virtual representation of the real DOM. So whenever we apply a change to React, change to the HTML document, the DOM, it'll first compute the only the necessary part. It won't render like the every changes. So it will compute the difference between the virtual DOM and the real DOM, and then only apply the changes. So this is one of the reasons that why we say React gives you much more performance. So when it comes to like large scale applications, React makes it much better choice. So next we have JSX. So JSX is a very crucial part in your React journey. Like for JSX we use to like describe how the UI would look like, right? But in your context, like if you're familiar with HTML, you'll be using something. You'll be using HTML, right? You wouldn't be using something called JSX. So JSX is a syntactical extension of JavaScript, but it looks like HTML. So for example, if you see the above image, you see there's a constant element, right? So this is a JavaScript element, right? And you see these familiar divs and the heading tags and the heading 2 tag, then you have a div. So we see this familiar HTML here, right? But this is actually a JavaScript variable. So that's what makes JSX very exciting, right? So we can actually use our HTML-like code inside JavaScript. So that actually helps you to have the same UI and the logic of the relevant UI to be in a single JavaScript file. And also, since this is based on JavaScript, you can also use like conditions like if or a loop. So in our actual practical session, you guys would see that we will be using JSX and we'll be using conditions and JavaScript inside these JSX as well. So that helps you and helps you to design your UI much easier. And this, so if you see this image, like right now, it's same as what I showed earlier. We have an element and we have the JSX, right? So underneath of React, what happens is that it basically uses a Babel, a tool that you can compile React, and it'll whenever we write JSX like this, it'll compile it to this level. So it passes through this create element function. So you can see inside the create element function, we are passing the heading and the class name and the content, right? So this way, React would generate the actual HTML content because browsers can't understand JSX directly. So React uses its own library to compile it to the way the browser can understand it. Then, so this is the most crucial and the most important thing when you're starting React, because you will be using components everywhere. So if you're familiar with OOP, so you'll be using classes, right? So classes are defined for a particular context, and you can share, reuse the classes, and the logic can be reshared. So that's why we use classes, right? So components does a similar behavior in React. So the simplest way you can define a component is using functional components. So you can see here we have a component here. So we have defined the function keyword, and then we have the welcome that is going to be our component name. So basically this welcome component is going to be like whenever you load your application, when you want to say hello and someone's name, right? So this is what the welcome component does. And inside the function arguments, you can see something called props. So these would be the properties that you're going to pass to the component, and then you see the return statement, and then you see this JSX, right? So it says hello, and then we are passing the argument or name, so it will print whatever the property that we are passing to the welcome. So you will clearly understand this better when you actually implement in the code. So try to hang with me here. And then the one below, this we could use like ES6 class components to build components as well. So these, as I mentioned, it looks much similar to what you guys use when you are doing classes as well with OOP. The reason why we are not, so we are going to focus on functional components in this session, because right now with the whole functional components, React has basically given everything. So we necessarily right now don't need to use class components anymore, and also like with functional components, code is much cleaner and very simple. As you can see, it's going to be like very few number of lines compared to what you see below, right? And also functional components do provide some edge-wise performance as well. And so when you continue on components part, anything in React application like a button or a form or dialog page, everything that you see in React would be a component. And so components let you split the UI into independent and a reusable piece. And thing is, and then you can think of isolation as well. So that helps you to like scale your application very easier, and you can basically reuse any code that you have done anywhere else as well. And this point you guys will understand better once Bhavan starts his session. So that so the root basically is a app.js. It's going to be app component. So that has like the root or the initial logic of your application would follow through app.js. So that you'll get familiar in our next session. And this, I think you already saw props when I defined the components early on, right? So props are like the properties that we pass to our components, right? So one thing that you need to understand is that props can't be ever mutated inside the component itself. So let me explain this a little bit more. So if you go down here, so inside this component, you can't never like, do props.name equal and do something else. So whatever properties that you pass, you can't mutate it later. For mutating and updating, we have something separate called states. We get into that. But ideally, you can't like never change the properties values inside the component itself. But if you want to like change the value from the parent itself, you can do. So for example, here right now, I'm calling the welcome component, right? So here name equals Sarah, right? So if you want to use it again, you can put welcome name equal Avishka, and it will print out hello Avishka, right? So it will do that. So you can change the properties in the parent, but never you can't do it, inside the component itself, right? And then we have something called states that I mentioned earlier, right? So states is how how the data inside the component, changes over time. So for this, you can use states to like, update. For example, if you have certain set of data that you need to get from my API or from a JSON file maybe. So for that, you need to have the data inside a state, right? Because you probably want to manipulate it and show it and update it, right? So for that case, you might need to use a state. And if you have a form and you need to understand how a form would change, whether the validation is correct. So you need to keep a track of the state throughout the component lifecycle, right? So for that, we have something called states, and we have a hook that we can use called useState. So this might be all confusing for you guys, but so I'll explain what a hook is as well, and probably with the practical session, you guys will be able to understand this properly. So try to keep track on here with me right now. And so the use state hook. So first of all, the hooks, right? So hooks actually were introduced when with React 16.8. So hooks with the name itself, like it lets you hook into React states and the lifecycle events of the functional components. So when I mean by lifecycle is that, so whenever a component initialized and whenever the component has been updated, or whenever the component is being demounted from the DOM, so such events we need to be in track of, right? So hooks let you like hook into these specific lifecycle events, and you can do modification based on that. So back then we didn't have hooks. With React 16.8, we can use hooks inside functional components. So that's one of the reasons why we don't need to use classes anymore. With hooks, we can do whatever that classes were able to do back then. And so majorly you would use state and use effect when you are beginners to React. So I'll explain what use state is, and use effect you'll probably get an idea when we are implementing on our piece application. And when it comes to rules on the hooks, you can only use hooks inside a functional component. So you can't use it inside a class component. And the next one is that hooks should be only called in a top level of the component. So you can't call it inside a loop or a condition. So that won't work with hooks as well. So right now I came to use state hook, right? So here I'll say how a state would be managed inside a component. So we have a example component. So this component is a counter. So this will display whenever I click this button with click me. So it'll increase the count and say you click the count these times, right? So first of all, we have the import statement with React and the use state hook as well. So initially I have declared the state variable. So you can see I call the use state hook here. And then you see the 0 here, right? So 0 is the default value that you will be passing. And then we have the count, that is going to be the state. And then we have set count is another return type here. So with the function where you can update the state. So for example, when I click the button, it'll be using the set count and it'll be updating count +1. So whenever I click, the count would be incremented by 1, right? And it'll be displayed here. So over time, whatever changes and the changes will happen, it'll render automatically with states. And this is like whenever you're mastering React, you need to like think beat in a different way, like rather than trying to put everything together. For example, if you see here right now, you have a comment component, right? So this comment component, you see it's bit cluttered like this, cluttered, right? There are a lot of codes here. If you look into it a bit deeper, you see that we have something called class name with the user info section where we have an avatar with the profile picture, and then we have a name, and then we have the comment text and the comment date. So with React, you shouldn't be like ever worried about splitting things into pieces. So we can always split things in components and call them whenever we need. So what you can do is like, so for example, this user info section, right? You can use this somewhere else. Like imagine you have a profile page. So in your profile page, you need to have this user info section with your name and the profile. So you can take it out, right? So what we can do is first we take the avatar component out. We take the avatar section out of it, and we have something called avatar component. And here we are loading the image and with the URL and the name. And then we have the user info section, right? So the user info section has like the avatar in the top part, and then we have the username in the down, right? So this actually make the component structure like more split. And so at the final output with the comment component, it's like, so if you look at the first glance, it's like only a few lines of code, right? And you see it's very clean. So this is why we should be very familiar with components. So whenever you see where you can share the same logic, you can create a component and have it separated out, and then reuse it everywhere. Even for a page, for a button, whatever, you can use a component. And before like going on, like right now, React is like very. So back when I started developing, React was something else. Like we didn't have these hooks, we don't have functional components, we were just using classes. But right now, React is advancing in a very fast way. So we have a lot of technologies right now that are actually based on React, and even right now we have frameworks that are coming based on React. So there are a lot of things that are being upgraded daily on React. So that's why you guys should always try to keep learning with React, and always try to adhere these few concepts that I have already mentioned. So right now, let's try to get on the coding part. And yeah, so we'll wrap up the session right now. And try to keep, as I mentioned, try to have the knowledge on what I mentioned, and then try to reuse the same thing and note them out when when Bhavan is doing his session with the actual application. Yeah, thanks all.
Thank you, Avishkar, for that insightful session. Before we move forward, let's get into some sponsor videos for the time being.
We have operated this company in Colombo for the last 15 years. We started in 2007, staff of 4 people, supporting one core product, and we've now grown to 85 people, supporting 15 plus products using various different modern technologies. We develop software for export only. This has given us an opportunity to bring in a steady flow of dollars into the country every month. We believe in giving university students an opportunity to work on real-world projects. As a result, we have built a very robust internship program. We have successfully implemented several CSR projects over the years, particularly focused on gender diversity. We have a very relaxed global one-office culture. We have standard HR policies across the board. We believe that respect must be shown to all fellow employees, regardless of geographic location. We believe that face-to-face interactions are very important in building business relationships. As a result, we regularly promote two-way travel programs and make it available for all of our staff on a regular basis.
Welcome back, everyone. And just a heads up to stay tuned until the end of the session to participate in the quiz and to be a winner as well. Now we would like to invite Bhavan for the second session of the webinar. Bhavan, over to you.
Thanks, Ajay. And thanks, Avishkar, for that insightful session. And let's go into the session that you all are waiting for, the coding session. Let me share my screen. Yeah. I hope everyone can see my screen. Yep. So before moving into the actual coding part, I want to tell you something. For anyone who is getting started into React development, I would recommend you to check out the React documentation. You can find it in reactjs.org. Any links that I'm going to talk in this session, we'll be sharing that at the end of the session, so you guys can go and check out, right? So in the React documentation, they'll be providing you the ways of getting started, right? So they'll be providing you the steps and what are the softwares that you need to be installed, all of those things. But actually, in order to get started with React, you don't need those things, right? Nowadays, we can find most of these React development environment in online, right? So for this session, I'm going to use something called StackBlitz, right? Which is an online IDE which helps you to build and test out React applications. So in order to get started, you need to go to that StackBlitz, and in front end, you can select the React JavaScript one. So as soon as you select it, it will provide you the developer environment that you need to get started, right? So this is actually providing you the boilerplate code that you need. So here you can see now we are having this app.js, and then there's an index.js, and there are some styles and a public folder. So this is the basic structure of a React project, right? So if I want to get a little bit deeper into this, so anyone who knows basic HTML and JavaScript knows an index.html is a file that we use to start our project, right? So in our index.html, you can see a div with an ID called root. And then the src folder contains our actual React code with the styles. And then there will be a package.json, which if you are using Node will come in handy. Here we are actually tracking the libraries that we are installing and the commands to start and run our application, right? So now we need to know what we are going to build, right? So I'll show you what we are going to build. So for today's session, we are planning to build a quiz application, which will look something like this, which you're seeing on the screen. So here we'll be having 4 questions, and at the end, you will be getting your score of what you scored. So I'll give you a small demo on that. Yep. Right. So we scored 2 out of 4, which is pretty good. And you can restart also. So this is what we are going to build, right? So in your boilerplate code, the actual point that a React app begins is this index.js, all right? So in this index.js, I'll go line by line. And on the first line, you are seeing the React is being imported from this React library. And then also we are importing something called strict mode, which will help us, finding out the bugs or the issues in our application. All right, that is also something React is providing to us. So all we need to do is we need to wrap our application with the strict mode, and it will show us the errors or any kind of bugs that we are making on this application. And then we are importing something called create root from the React DOM library. As Avishka mentioned, you guys might be knowing, right, what is DOM, right? So now what we actually going to do is, in this index.html file, you saw this div element with the ID root. We are actually going to get that element and inject whatever the React code that we are writing as a component, right? So in order to get that element, we are going to use document.getElementById, which is a usual JavaScript code everyone knows. And we got the element, and then we are creating the root using this create root function. And we got the root, and using this root, we are going to render, right? So this root as a function called render, right? So you can put a dot, and you can render whatever the thing that you want, right? So right now, what we are going to render is this app. you can see this app is being imported from this app.js, right? This is a React component. Usually this is the first React component that you are going to write. So inside this app.js, we are going to have all of our React code, all right? So let's go into our app.js. So you can see it's kind of look like a HTML element, right? So as Avishka mentioned in this session, this is how a component looks like in the JSX version. All right. So here we are seeing our app.js. We are importing React, and then we are importing some styles. So styles, you can find it in the style.css, which is pretty basic. It's just CSS. You import it, and then your app will be styled. Yep. So here, for every file, every React file, we need to export a default function, right? That default function is the function, or we call it as components, which contains the code for that particular file. So here we are going to export this app, right? Exporting, you guys, if you are into programming, you might be knowing those terms. We are going to get this particular function out of this file. So this particular app renders this piece of code. You got a div element and an h1 and a p tag. So you see, I'll just say hi/com. Yep. See, it changed right away. So which is called hot reload. So every React developer environment got this, right? As soon as you change something in your code, it will re-render your application, and you can see the changes right away. All right. So right now, I have another set of boilerplate code prepared to make our quiz application. Let's jump right into that. Yeah. So here you can see the same structure that you saw in the starter. We got our index.js, and we are getting this app. And in the public directory, I'm having the index.html as it is. Additionally, I'm having a JSON which contains the questions and the correct answers, for our quiz application. So in this JSON, you can see how are these questions formed. There will be a question and a correct answer and the set of answers. The correct answer 2 means, I hope everyone knows array indexing. Array indexing starts from 0. So 2 means the first one is 0 will be New York, 1 will be London, 2 will be Paris, and 3 will be Dublin, right? So correct answer is 2, which is Paris, right? So that's how it goes. Let's get into app, right? So you got a pretty basic component with some styles. I have already added some styles, which you can find in the style.css file. And here, what we need first to create this quiz application, we need the questions, right? So let's get the questions. So in order to get the questions, once we get the questions, we need to store it somewhere, right? That's where the states comes in, right? So as Avishka mentioned, now you guys will be knowing what is use state and how to use it. So now I'll show you a demo on a practical example of making use of use state. So here, what we need to do is we need to create a state variable, right? Let's say questions, and then in order to manipulate that state variable, we need a function called setQuestions. And then we'll be needing the use state hook from React, right? So we need to import it. How do we import it? We go right in here and we import it, right? Now we got the use state hook. So this is a simple JavaScript function, right? We call it as hook, but this is a simple function. So you can give it an initial value. So at the beginning, I'm going to make our questions array or empty array, right? And then what actually happening is these questions, you can't actually modify these, since these are constants. You can't actually modify these. So these questions will hold the question values, so you can use it anywhere. If you are using it inside this component, right, in a JSX element, it will re-render the application, all right, whenever this particular value changes. So to get the questions, so it's a kind of an effect, right? So getting the question, it's an effect, right? So that's where use effect comes in. So I'm going to show you how to write a use effect hook. So it goes like this: use effect. So use effect actually takes in two arguments. The first one will be the effect, and the next one will be the dependencies. So what is dependencies? So dependency is something, when this particular dependency changes, your whole effect will have to rerun, right? That's basically what is a dependency. If I want to give you an real world example, let's take a human being, right? When age increases, we are growing, right? So it's like age is a dependency and growing is the effect. So usually this effect will be a function. So I'll write a JSX function right here. And for dependencies, we need to pass the dependencies as an array. So since we only need to fetch the questions on the first times of our application rendering, we don't really need any dependency here. So to get the questions, we have the data.json file inside our public directory. So we can use fetch library to get it. Data.json, and then this will return you a promise. So you'll get the response, and then you need to get the JSON value of that response. And after that, what you need to do is, now you have the JSON value of the response, which is a promise. So you'll now get the actual data which you will be needing, right? So let's just console log what is actually being returned from this data. So when you console log, it will be logged here. So the use effect, I need to import. Yep. Yeah. The use effect is imported. Let's see whether it's logging. We can also have a catch. If we find any errors, right? We always have this catch, right? To find out what are the errors that will be happening inside our application. So you can log it as well.
Excuse me, there is double in JSON right now.
Right. There's an N missing. Yep. Now we are good to go. We got the questions as an array. So inside an array, what you saw in the JSON will be here. So now we are good to go. Good to go. So all I need to do is, now I have to set this value using the set questions. I'll be getting this set questions, and you need to pass the actual value, which is data dot questions, right? All right. So now this questions state variable contains the questions that we need. If you want to see it in the UI, we can simply loop through it and render it in the UI. So I'll show you how to loop through it and render it in the UI. So inside a JSX tag, if you want to write JavaScript code, you will add the curly braces and type in questions. So now you need to loop through it. You can use functions like map for each. I'm going to use map. So I'm going to get one question, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to get a p tag to display that. So here I'm getting a one question. So this question, remember, is coming from here. So this particular object is what we are retrieving as a question. So in order to access the actual question value, we need to type in as quiz.question, right? If you type quiz.correct answer, you will be getting the correct answer, right? All right. So now let's think in React way. So we can't be coding everything in one particular class, right? That's not the React way. The React way, as Avishka mentioned, putting them into separate components. So we have a loading component and a quiz box component to hold our quiz, which will be having 4. So we can reuse it, and then the result to show your actual result. So this loading is pretty straightforward. I can get the code from here. See, it's just going to display something called loading, right? So where this loading actually comes, here when we are looping, we are going to loop through these questions, right? So we can do something like this. If our question array has a length of 0, we actually know it's still our application is still fetching the necessary data, right? So I'm going to get like question.length. If it is greater than 0, I actually know I'm going to I have questions, right? So this is a turn it operation. So whatever you have here will be running if it is true. Whatever you have here will be running if it is false, right? So as you can see, it was false and then it turned into true, which means at first we have an empty array. As soon as we fetch the data, it turned into true. So now all I have to do is I need to import my loading component into this particular class. Yeah. Right. Let's import the component. Import loading from yep. So now all we have to do is inside this true string, right? We need to have our quiz box, right? So our quiz box goes like this. So what are the things that we actually need to have in our quiz box? So you need to have the question. See, you need to have this question, and then the question title, and then the actual question, and there will be 4 options, right? So for the actual title, we can wrap our entire thing like this. So as you guys can see, this empty looking HTML element is actually a React fragment. If you don't want any HTML element that needs to be rendered in your screen, you can use this. This is a way to wrap multiple HTML tags or JSX tags into one, right? Because a React component always expect a single component to be returned, right? Right. So now we can have our div, which will be covering the entire quiz section, and inside that we'll be needing another div to get our question title. So here, as I'm writing, you can see I'm not writing class, right? I'm writing class name. So these are the changes between usual HTML and JSX. In JSX, you write it as class name, and in usual HTML, you just write it as class, right? So the class will be question count. Yep. And then this question count, which actually needs to hold the value of what is the question. So we'll put a span tag for that, this question. And here we need to have that actual question count. So How do we get the question count? We can get it from the parent. The parent means wherever I'm going to call this quiz box, that's the parent of this particular application, right? Here I'm going to call the quiz box, right? So this quiz box now contains a prop called current question, right? I can pass the current question, all right? So this current question now comes to the part where we need to store the current question into a state variable. So we can store it like this. The same use effect, same use state. We can create a state variable for this current question, and you need to manipulate that particular variable, right? So you will be needing a set current question function as well, right? So we don't really need to store the entire option. So what I'll do is I'll just store the index. So index will be 0, 1, 2, 3, right? Since we have 4 in the array. So I can pass this particular value into our quiz box. So this quiz box, I need to import it, import quiz box from components / quiz box, right? So now as I'm importing this quiz box, you can see the question word or the HTML span tag that I added inside the quiz box appears here. So if I want to access this current question in a prop or the variable, I can just call it inside here. So since we are passing 0 means since we are passing the initial value, it will show you the initial value. And additionally, we can also pass the entire questions here as well, so that we can get the length of the questions. So questions here, what we actually going to do is questions dot length. So it will look something like this, right? 1 out of 4. So we need to get the questions. So how do we get the questions? We again go back to our app.js where we are calling this quiz box, and here the questions, we can get it from the state variable. Keep in mind, every time this question particular state is going to be changed, this entire quiz box component is going to be re-rendered, right? Yep. Now we pass the questions as well here, and then going back to our quiz box, now you guys can actually see 4 being rendered in the screen. So the next thing that we need is the actual question itself. So we can give it a class name as question text. So why I am giving these class names, right? So based on these class names, I have added separate styles. So that's how these things are getting styled, right? Otherwise, you can go with inline styles, but it's more, your code will be more reusable if you get your CSS into a separate CSS file. So this question text. So in order to access the question text, right? What I will be needing is this current question. Here, this will be the actual index. I'll also need the current question here as well. Right. Here you go. Let's see how we coded in here. So here we are getting the current question index. Yep. So here, what we actually can do is, so we are getting all the questions and then the whole question array also. So based on this array, we can access the current questions, right? Current question, right? So we don't need to get it from the prop. So now we are accessing the current question. So this current question holds the value of in this particular JSON data that you are seeing, question, correct answer, and all the answers. So let's get the questions. Right, you got the question. So still, I need this question here and question index here. Yep, and current question, that question. If we are actually getting values for this should render out what we are intending, and then we should go for this answers, right? For these answers, let's go to div like div I'll comment out for a while. We can give it a class name like, right, question answers maybe. Yeah. So this question answer actually holds the entire 4 answers that we need. So what we can actually do is we instead of writing the same button or any kind of HTML element 4 times, we can loop through them and find the actual value, right? Since the current question index is always 0, here we can get the answers. See, this is how we get the answers. So we can map through it, right? And for each answer, I'm going to render out a particular button component. So this button component will be our answer, right? So for this, we can actually refer to the previous code that I have written. So this is the same code that I've written here. So here we are getting the current question, and we are actually incrementing it by 1 because this array indexing starting from 0, for a user to be seeing it in a usual way, it should be added 1. So 0 will be displayed as 1. So our first question is 1, 2, 3, 4. It goes like that, and then your current question holds this question value, which will be rendered here, and then your current question also has these answers, right? Important. So these answers we can map it, and we are adding this answer into a button element. So here, every time you render something, right, you render it in a loop, there are going to be multiple elements rendered in the screen. So in React, it's a best practice to always give a key to all the elements that you are rendering. So our map function actually gives you 2 arguments that you can use. The first one will be the actual value of the array that you are looping through, and the next one will be the index of each item that you're looping through. So using this index, I added this as I, so you can give the key value. So every button will have on click, right? If you work with HTML, we have on click, which is a event. Whenever the button clicks, we can capture it and do some stuff with it. So with this on click, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to call a function called on answer click, right? And I'm going to pass 2 arguments into that as parameters. The first one will be current question, and then the answer, right? The answer that user is going to click. So where does this function comes from? On answer click. So this on answer clicks, we are actually passing it as a prop, right? This is what we call as callback functions. So from parent element to the child element, we can pass the data as props, right? But when it comes to child to parent data flow, we need to use callback function to pass the data back into the parent component. So now our parent component gets the current question and then the answer that the user chose. So since this is a completed code, for the time being, what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain the code that we have written. And anyways, at the end of the session, we'll be sharing the GitHub repository that we created for this. So you can try on your own as well. So inside of app.js, we had the questions as an array, and then we kept the score as a state variable. So we have the score and the set score to manipulate that score value. As a initial value, we are going to give it as 0. And then we are having a Boolean state variable. Boolean state variables are actually used for conditional rendering. So what is conditional rendering, right? Conditional rendering means based on a condition, you're going to render a piece of code, right? Or a piece of component. So show results will be, if you want to show your results, you can render the result component which we created here. So this result component will get the score from the parent and then the total questions in order to get the total question count. So this will be printed out as use code 2 out of 4, something like that. And then you will have a button to restart. So this restart also have this callback function on restart. So this will be called whenever you click on this restart button. And the actual task that we are going to perform on this on restart will be on app.js. So this app.js, we are holding the questions, score, and the Boolean variable show results, and then the current question index. Each index of this current question that we are having on screen will be storing the index in this current question index. So to get the data here, we have written it in the asynchronous way. I would recommend everyone to use this asynchronous way because it makes your code much cleaner. And when it goes to asynchronous, your performance will be also higher, right? So we are fetching the data and we are setting the questions, and using the use effect, we can call this function inside the use effect because this is the effect, right? So we are going to render that effect, and we got the questions. So here the actual code inside of app.js will be, if you want to show the result, I'm going to render the result component with the score and the total questions and on restart function. So if not, if I don't want to show the result, which means I want to show the questions. So here also we have a conditional rendering. So if the questions length is greater than 0, which means we have questions, then we need to render the quiz box. Until that, we can render the loading. All right. So this coming back to the callback function, I only showed you, how we are using the callback function inside the child, right? So now I'm going to show you how we are going to use the callback function in the parent. So we got the on restart and on answer click as callback function, and we are actually attaching a function to it. So you can see we have a handle answer option and then a handle restart, right? We are going to handle that, right? We are going to handle the callback. So this is a usual naming convention that you can use. It's doesn't really matter whatever the function names that you're going to use, right? These are like usual reactive way to write callback function handlers, right? But keep in mind, you can't change the name of the hooks. Use effect will be use effect, use state will be use state. So handle answer option gets two arguments passed as parameters: current question and answer. So current question holds what is the current question, the answers, the correct answer and all. And the next answer will be the user's answer, whatever the thing that user clicked. So based on the current question, we are having this answers array. And on this answers array, we can pass the correct answer as an index. See, as shown in this data.json, we can pass these two as this index for this answers array, which will return you Paris, right? So we are getting that value, and we are checking whether the user has clicked on this particular correct value. So we are checking whether those are equals, the user's answer and the correct answer. If that is true, what we are going to do is we are going to increment the score by 1, and that will be our new score. So that's why we are setting the score incremented by 1. And then as soon as this user clicks on a particular answer, whether it's correct or not, we need to move to the next question. So the next question index will be 1 higher than the current question index. So that's why we are getting this next question index. So we only have 4 questions, or whatever the questions that we have in the questions array. So until we are having this next question index less than the questions array's length, for our example it will be 4, right? Until that is less than 4, we need to keep on moving to the next question. But the moment we reach the 4th question, we need to show the results. So set show results would be true. So when it becomes true, show results will actually render your results, right? So that's the actual logic behind what's happening on this each question click. So when I click on New York, the correct answer will be Paris and my answer will be New York. So it won't increase my score. So I'm just going to keep on moving to the next question. All right. So here we got into the restart part. So restart also have this callback function called handle restart. So what do we actually need to do when it comes to restart, right? We need to set everything back to this previous state. Our score will be 0, and our current question will be the first question, and we don't want to show the results. So we are actually setting everything back to the initial values using the state variables. So that's actually it, right? That's how you actually build a React application using we have discussed about use state, use effect, callback functions, and even fetch on how you can get the data from a separate JSON, and how you can divide your React application into multiple smaller components, and how you can loop through data and render them out. So that's it for the session. I hope you had a wonderful session, right? If you guys have any questions, you can ask them in the chat. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Bhavan, for that informative session. So now we can move on to the most awaited moment of the session, which is the quiz. And the question will pop up on the screen, and you can drop your answers to the chat. So yes, the name of the quiz winner is displayed on the screen. So SADRL Jaivira, congratulations for that. With that, we would like to once again say a special thank you to our platinum sponsors. We have LSEG and Vital Hub Innovations. Gold sponsors, Pearson, Oral IT, and Accents. And our knowledge partner for this session is Tech Labs Global. We appreciate your support for making this event a possibility. The next session of the Tech Webinar series will be on developing cloud-based systems, scheduled on the 8th of December, and we hope to see you then. Our speakers for the session today were Avishka Tushan Padmasiri and Loganathan Bhavanitharan. We are very grateful for your presence. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who joined us, and have yourselves a pleasant evening.